Okay, so this is how to make the snowflake that I made earlier. It's not quite perfect because it's kind of been already through the mill. The only thing I would say is once you take these off, be careful with these loops because they are loose. But this is what we're going to make now. And I did find, that was a plain yarn that I had, but I did find what was called Red Heart Shimmer. I'm not sure how well it's going to show up, but it's supposed to have a little more shimmer to it. So we're going to use that just to see. Now, I'm not going to re-go through how to do the drawstring cast on. That's what you're going to use for this one. So if you don't know how to do the drawstring cast on, then please go look at my video about the drawstring cast on, because that's what you're going to do first. So go ahead, figure that out, get your drawstring cast on, and I'll meet you right after that. Okay, so you've done the drawstring cast on to make the snowflake. Go back around and do an E-wrap and knit that over. That's all I'm doing is E-wrapping. Keeping sure that your yarn isn't too tangled or anything like that to keep you from being able to work with it. And then just knit over. And what you're going to end up doing is, because this is a drawstring cast on, you're going to end up drawing it closed in order to make the actual snowflake. The first thing you do is a couple rows, of the drawstring to kind of help set the snowflake in there. In a little bit we'll actually do the points, but we're going to do a few E-wrap rows around. That's all you're going to do, is do a few of them around. That's all I'm doing is E-wrapping it around, so it's like that, and then knitting over. And it's basically the same idea as when we do the drawstring, as if we were closing it off. But what we're going to do in a little bit here is create the actual points. But the points are kind of almost the last thing that you're going to create. So you kind of work your way around. So you're going to do that for probably, it's hard to say because it all depends on what kind of design you want your snowflake to have. As you can tell, this one's a little more closed off that I did. So it really depends on how closed off you want the snowflake to be. Now the other thing you can do is, once you've done a few rows, you can take this off the anchor and you can kind of make it so that it's inside so that you can use that to be able to pull when you're ready. But the other thing with this, you don't want to pull it until you're actually ready to make the snowflake. Unlike the other times where we kind of pull it when we're checking. You don't want to do that yet, because that's what's going to make it tighter. So it all depends. Like this one actually might be different than the other one. This one might, I wanted to see if I could do one a little more open, just because I felt that it might look more like a snowflake. But it all depends on you. You go around as many times as you feel comfortable. You just don't want it to be too far down. So it could be, I mean, you just got to experiment too, because it all depends on how you want your snowflake to look in terms of how much detail is in the inside. So that's why I just use the E-wrap method. Okay, because it's kind of getting to the point where it's probably going to be wrapped enough. But just for safekeeping, what you can kind of do is push it down to kind of see how it's looking, how far down it looks when it's on there. Like it's not even coming through the bottom yet, which is probably really good for the snowflake idea. So we're going to do one more time around, and then I'll show you how I do the actual points, and we'll see how it turns out. Like I said, it's not going to be exactly the same as the one I did, but if it ends up being more open, then all you would do is go around more times before you close off the drawstring. So that's all I'm doing is E-wrapping and bringing it over. Now the next step is going to be to make the points of the snowflake. And I'm sure there's different techniques you can do in this part that you can play around with as well. You could try purling it and see if it makes a different effect. You can do a tighter stitch, like the 1/2 to make it tighter, and see if that creates a better effect. So this is just the basic idea, and you can go from there. Okay, so we got it wrapped down, and as you can tell, after I push them down, they're kind of just starting to come through. So that's probably going to be a good enough length. Now we need to make the points, and to make the points, we're just moving a loop from one peg to another peg. So we're going to start, this is the starting point. If you're left-handed, just because I know there's some people that watch this that are left-handed, just start this way if you want. It doesn't really matter which way you do this to me. So you're going to take this peg, take the loop off of it, and move it over to the one next to it. Now we're going to leave that alone for now, so that way you remember which ones you moved over. So then go to the next one and pull that one onto the next one. So basically you're working your way around every other one so that it's going to end up having pegs with two. That's how it's looking on the side. That way if you don't knit them over yet, you'll be able to see exactly what you're doing. And you can make sure you don't miss one or do one you shouldn't do. So that's all we're going to do. And now once we've got them all double up, so see how they're skipping, then go back through and knit them over. And this will create the points. And how do you see that? Just take your drawstring and pull it. And bring it down a little bit and you'll see that as you pull it, it kind of creates those points for a snowflake. And like I said, this one looks different than this one. It all depends on the technique you do. But as they always say, no two snowflakes are exactly alike. So I'm going to come back in a minute and I'll show you how I take this off. Like this, and now it's time to take it off the loom. The first thing you want to do is make sure that this is tied off so that it doesn't get loose. The best thing to do is grab a crochet hook and bring it through to the other side so you can tie a knot in it. So I'm just bringing it through to the front. And then I'm just going to like kind of pick up another stitch next to it and then bring it through there a little ways so that I can make a knot with it, just to keep the middle from unraveling. You just pull it tight, and that will keep the middle the way it needs to be. So you can cut off the excess of that so you don't get it tangled in with something else. Now when I take this off, I'm just simply lifting it off the loops for right now. But what you can probably do is while it's on it, first cut yourself some extra yarn off it so you're not dealing with having a bunch of yarn. Okay, and then you're just going to pull them gently off the loom. Now the loops will be kind of, be careful with tugging on them too much, and then it should fall right out. And as you see, there's our snowflake. You can kind of fix the loops. Now this string you're saying, well that's what am I going to do with that? Well, you're just going to want to do like you did with the drawstring and create a tie-off point. So kind of go to a stitch kind of like underneath it, or just anywhere that you can kind of pull it through, and you're going to make that slip knot just like you did in the other, or the knot like you did in the other part. So you're creating a loop, and just kind of check your loops to make sure that they're still up there, and just tie that closed, and you should still have your flower, or your snowflake. Like I said, you can try different designs and see how well they come out. But if it doesn't look like it's going to stay tight, just give it another spot and do another knot just to kind of keep it. Because it is a very like almost delicate thing. It's just, the loops will run out. So all I'm doing is just trying to create a knot in another spot. Just anything to keep it as secure as I can on there. Because like I said, it is pretty flimsy. That's why I would almost get a piece of felt. And then after you get kind of the design you want, because you can see you can kind of play around with it a little bit, I would almost, if you had, which I don't have any fabric, but okay, say this was felt that you could take and set it on top, and then you could stitch the points down. That's what I think would actually help for me to keep most of its shape. And then once you got it tight enough that you feel like it's not going to come undone, like I said, then just cut that excess off, and you've got your snowflake. Like I said, try different designs with it and see if you can get different shapes or anything in there. That's what it looks like. So I hope that tutorial helped.